Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Paula, and on this channel we break down what's really happening in crypto, macro and global markets. Not just what's on the surface, but the deeper story behind it, so that you can actually understand where things might be heading next. Now today's video starts with something that on the surface doesn't look that big. But the more you sit with it, the more you realise it's actually saying a lot about the direction things are heading. Because the UK is now moving to ban crypto donations to political parties. At first glance, that sounds quite niche, like something that doesn't really affect most of us day to day. But I want to show you why this isn't really about donations. It's about something much deeper. This is about control, influence, and what happens when money becomes borderless in a world that isn't used to that yet. Because once money can move anywhere, influence can move anywhere too. And that is where things start to get interesting. Now, the reason behind this move is concerns around foreign interference. The idea that money coming into politics, especially through something like crypto, could be harder to control, harder to trace back to its true source, and potentially used to influence outcomes in ways that traditional systems wouldn't allow. And if you look at it from that angle, it makes sense. Because politics has always been tightly linked to money. Campaigns need funding, messaging needs funding. Influence, at its core, is often tied to capital. And traditionally, that money has moved through systems that are controlled. Banks, institutions, regulated financial rails. Systems where there are checkpoints, gatekeepers. Places where things can be monitored, paused, or stopped if needed. But crypto changes that because it removes a lot of these checkpoints. It allows money to move instantly across borders without relying on the same intermediaries. And that doesn't just change finance, it changes how influence can operate. Because now money isn't confined to one country or one system. And if you zoom out, this isn't just a UK story. This is part of something bigger that's starting to unfold globally. In the US, crypto is already being used in politics. You've got large companies, institutions, and large players funding campaigns, lobbying for regulation, and actively shaping policy. Crypto isn't being blocked there, it's being integrated. In Ukraine during the war, crypto was used to raise huge amounts of funding quickly, efficiently, and without relying on traditional systems. That showed just how powerful this technology can be when it comes to real world impact. And in Europe, we're seeing more regulation, more tracking, more oversight, not banning it, but tightening control around it. And now the UK draws a very specific line, not banning crypto itself, but saying not here, not in politics. And that raises a really important question. If crypto is being accepted in finance, if institutions are building on it, if it's being integrated into the system, then why is it suddenly too risky when it comes to political influence? And I think the answer to that sits in something we don't always talk about directly. Because crypto doesn't just change how money moves, it changes who can use money to influence outcomes. And politics runs on influence. Now, when you combine that with the world we're currently living in, rising geopolitical tension, uncertainty around energy, economic pressure building, warnings about potential recession if things escalate, you start to see why governments are becoming more protective. Because in times like this, control matters more, stability matters more, and anything that introduces uncertainty into political systems becomes a risk. So this decision from the UK, it's not just a policy, it's a signal. A signal that crypto might be accepted in some areas, but not in others. And especially not in areas where influence and power are directly involved. Now, here's where I want to bring this back to something more personal. Because everything we're talking about here, macro, geopolitics, institutional flows, influence, that's the environment that we're all trying to trade in. This is the backdrop behind every chart you're looking at. And if we're being honest, it's not simple anymore. This isn't just about support and resistance. It's not just about patterns. You've got narratives shifting constantly. You've got global events impacting sentiment overnight. You've got institutions moving sides that can change direction quickly. And then on top of all of that, you've got your own emotions when you're in a trade. And I think this is where a lot of people struggle because we're all trying to navigate something incredibly complex on our own. And I've been there, sitting, staring at the charts, trying to make sense of everything, second guessing entries, closing trades too early, or holding on to something because you're hoping it turns around. And the truth is, a lot of that doesn't come down to skill, it comes down to isolation. Because how do you improve if you've got no one to talk to? How do you learn if you can't bounce ideas off of anyone? How do you spot what you're doing wrong if there's no one there to point it out? And I think that's something that people don't talk about enough in this space because everyone focuses on strategies, indicators, entries, exits, but they don't talk about the environment you're learning in. And the reality is, your environment matters more than you think because when you're on your own, you're limited to your own perspective, your own experience, your own biases. And honestly, that can only take you so far. But when you're around other people, everything changes. Because suddenly you're not just seeing one way of looking at the market, you're seeing multiple. You're hearing different ideas, different interpretations, different setups. You're able to ask questions. You're able to challenge your thinking. You're able to say, this is what I'm seeing. Does that make sense? And that is where real learning happens, not in isolation, but in conversation. And I think that's something I didn't fully appreciate until I experienced it properly. Because once you've been in that kind of environment, you realise how difficult it is to go back to doing it on your own. Because trading isn't just technical, it's psychological, it's emotional, it's about making decisions under pressure. And those things are a lot easier to manage when you're not doing it alone. When you've got people around you who understand what you're going through, who are looking at the same markets, who are experiencing the same volatility, and who you can ask in real time. And that is exactly the reason we built the Crypto Wolfpack. Because we didn't want people to feel like they were just sitting on the edge of this space, trying to piece everything together on their own. Inside the Wolfpack, you're not just watching from the outside, you're part of it. We've got people in there at all different levels. People who are just starting out, people who've been trading a while, and people who are really experienced. And what's powerful is everyone contributes something. There's always somebody who sees something you don't. Always someone who can say, have you looked at this? Or this is how I'm approaching it. We go through charts together, we talk through macro together, we trade spot and leverage strategies. And we do daily live streams where you can literally sit there with us and go through the market in real time. So instead of feeling like you're guessing, you're actually part of the process. And if you want to go deeper, you can either book one-to-one sessions with me or any of the other moderators. So you're not left trying to figure everything out on your own. And I think that's the difference. It's not just information, it's connection. It's being able to say, I'm not doing this alone anymore. And I can see from you guys on YouTube how engaged you already are. So if you've been watching, learning, trying to piece it all together, but you still feel like you're slightly on the outside of it, that's exactly the gap that this fills. So if this resonated with you, you can check it out at cryptowolfpack.co.uk or use the link in the description. And I've also got a discount code for you. It's Paula25, which gives you 25% off your first month. But honestly, even beyond that, whether it's with us or with someone else, find your people in this space. It really makes a bigger difference than you even realise. Now, bringing this back to the bigger picture, because everything we've just talked about, community, sharing knowledge, collaboration, that's one side of crypto. But there's another side. And that's where things start to intersect with power. Because when you combine money, politics, and global networks, you're no longer just talking about finance, you're talking about influence. And influence is one of the most powerful forces in the world because it shapes narratives, it shapes public opinion, and ultimately, it shapes elections. And we already know that influence doesn't just go through money, it happens through information, through media, through social platforms, through messaging. So now imagine combining those two things: information and capital, narratives and funding, both operating in a borderless, decentralized system. That's a completely new dynamic, and it's one that governments are just starting to grapple with. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you want more deep dive content like this, make sure to like and to subscribe. And as always, if you want to know the exact strategies we use to make money in the Crypto Wolfpack, in both the bull market and the bear market, we've made a completely free course for you. It's called the Crypto Liftoff course, and the link is in the description. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.